Now let's talk about proteins. Proteins are found throughout the body. They are the basic structural building blocks. They control a lot of the reactions, and they're involved in just about every reaction of the body. Since proteins are involved in almost every biological process of the body, you won't be surprised to find that they have lots of different uses. For example, they can be found as enzymes. Enzymes are used to make reactions go faster, and these are going to be proteins specifically designed to make a reaction go faster. They may be found as storage proteins, where they store up proteins, or they store other things to help reactions go better. They may be used for transport, to transport something from one position to another where it's needed. They are considered contractile proteins. Contractile proteins are the ones that stretch and move and are what you know as muscles. They are protective proteins. That means they help protect the body from any invaders. They could be something like antibodies, or they could be used for other purposes within the body to help protect the body from damage. They're used as hormones to help control and regulate things that happen within the body, and they are structural proteins. They help build the body up, including those muscles that we talked about earlier, but also things like alpha keratin, collagen, and elastin, which hold the body together. Clearly, there are lots of uses for proteins, but we're not going to expect you to memorize them or know which one does what. I will tell you, though, in general, if it ends with ACE, that means it's probably an enzyme, and its job is to break something down. So, for example, we have sucrase. What does it do? It hydrolyzes sucrose into glucose and fructose. Lipase, its job is to break down lipids. Protease breaks down proteins. Other enzymes like hexokinase and DNA polymerase are used to build things up, and other ones like cytochrome C are used to transport electrons from one side to another so that a reaction can occur. The main thing that you need to know for the test about enzymes is that they are proteins that catalyze reactions. These proteins are high molecular weight polymers of alpha amino acids. In organic chemistry, we would note that there is an amino group and a carboxylic acid group. So that's where it comes up with the name amino acid. The alpha part of it means that those two groups are attached to the same carbon, so that makes this an alpha amino acid. In the alpha amino acids, we also see that there's always a hydrogen on that central carbon, and then there's an R group. And if you recall from organic chemistry, R means it could be variable, and that is the part that changes within the amino acids. So amino acids all have an amine group, they have a carboxyl group, and they all have a hydrogen, and what changes is this R group. There are about 20 very common amino acids, another 6 to 10 of them that are rare, but we do see them, and so the only thing that's changing on these amino acids, though, is that R group. Before we continue on with proteins, we're going to talk a little bit more about the alpha amino acids and their properties. As previously mentioned, the alpha amino acids have 4 parts to them. They have the amino group, they have the acid group, they have a hydrogen, and they have an R group. And recall that the R group is the one that changes dependent upon the amino acid we're specifically talking about. The rest of it stays the same. The amino acids themselves are not proteins. They are part of the protein. They are the building block of proteins, but they themselves are not proteins. Now, amino acids are amphoteric, and what amphoteric means is it means that it can react as both an acid and a base. When an amino acid reacts as an acid, that means it loses that hydrogen that made us call it an acid, so it's taking it off of the carboxylic group. On the other hand, when it reacts as a base, it's going to take an extra hydrogen from something else and add it to the nitrogen, so that we end up with something called a Zwitter ion. When both sides react, we end up with something that is both positively and negatively charged, which is known as a Zwitter ion, a double-charged group that is both on the same molecule. One molecule that has both a positive and a negative is called a Zwitter ion. We know that amino acids are also buffers, and the reason we say that they're buffers is because they can act as both an acid and a base. What that means is if I have an amino acid and I add some H plus to it, from its Zwitter ion form, as the Zwitter ion, we add H plus to it, and it's going to become protonated and become positively charged overall. If we add a base to this buffer, which is a weak acid and a weak base, we end up taking away that hydrogen from the amine, and we end up with our carboxylate salt, the neutral amine, and water. And finally, amino acids exhibit optical isomerism. That means that they have stereochemistry. In this case, only the L isomers are found in nature. If you recall, in the carbohydrates, only the D isomers were found. In this case, only the L isomers are found. How do we see stereochemistry? The stereochemistry comes from the fact that we have a carbon with 4 different groups attached to it, one of which is the amine, one is a carboxylic acid, one is the hydrogen, and the last one is this R group. While there are about 30 amino acids found in nature, only about 20 of those are used commonly to make proteins. Of those 20, 10 of them are readily synthesized in the body. The other 10 are what we call essential amino acids. The essential amino acids must be eaten. They must be obtained in the diet from another source. When people are on diets that limit the amount of protein that they eat, either because it's just a low protein diet or because they're vegan or vegetarian, one of the things that's often said is that you have to make sure that you get complete proteins. Complete proteins include all of these essential amino acids. In this chart of common complete proteins, we can see that milk, eggs, and beef all have complete proteins, and that's not surprising because they are sourced from animals. We can also see here that eggs have the highest concentration of all of the essential amino acids, so it is considered one of the best sources of proteins. Next, we can see that some of these grains, the wheat, the rice, the soy, are also complete proteins. But oftentimes people are sensitive to foods that have wheat and soy and possibly rice in them, and so they avoid those. If you're a vegan, you want to be particularly careful that you have all of the amino acids. One of the best ways to do this is to ensure that you have a mix of foods that includes all of the essential amino acids. Sometimes you may hear the term limiting amino acid. So of the essential amino acids, several of them are often missing from nuts and grains. This is an issue especially for people that are vegan because they eat no animal products and do not get the essential amino acids as easily. So notice in this table that quite often many of them are missing lysine. So notice these ones with D's mean that they're deficient in lysine. So what can be done to help with this is to make sure that you eat foods that are not deficient in that. One of the most common diets in the world is to eat rice and beans. And this works out as a very good diet because while the beans are missing methionine and the rice is missing lysine, they are both high in the other one. So legumes happen to be very high in lysine and rice happens to be very high in methionine. And so these two complement each other and they make a complete protein. We can also see a similar effect when hummus is made. Hummus is made with chickpeas, which is a legume, low in methionine, and tahini, which is made from sesame seeds, which is low in lysine. When we put those together, again, we have a complete protein.